So, could you tell us about your expertise in BRRRR investing? What is it, and how can investors capitalize on that?
Yeah, so the BRRRR investing is how I've built the portfolio, outside of the live-in flips and the house hacks. And so that has been, I think BRRRRs can take a number of different ways that you can execute on them. There's your typical one where you're going to buy a house that needs a full renovation or a multi-unit that needs a full renovation. You're going to buy it cheap enough that you can put the renovation into it, and then with your after valuation, you're able to pull out all your money and kind of repeat it. Um, there's also an opportunity if you know areas and you just get something for a low enough value that you can then take that and you can refinance it and you don't actually have to do really any work to it. So that's kind of like the two spectrums of the BRRRR. So one, you just find a good enough deal where you can just refinance out of it. Or in Baltimore, we have a lot of areas where it's relatively block to block. So you might be able to buy on one block and get a valuation from another block from an appraiser. And so it's pretty cool as long as you're comfortable with where that is. We bought a single family home from a wholesaler for $63,000, and we're doing a refinance now. It's worth about $100,000. So we'll be able to pull out all the cash, and all we did was just purchase it cash, purchase it quickly, and then understand what the valuations were like in the area and what an appraiser might do it. And I think we could actually sell that one for that. So that's like the light end of the BRRRR, being really well capitalized and being able to find the deals. And then the other one, to give you another example, would be like me and one of my partners bought a 18 unit portfolio, six different buildings. Basically, all of them were 3 units, and we renovated the whole thing. Bought it for 200 grand, put about $900,000 into it. We're just finishing it up, and those were like really robust projects. Really challenging in the fact that it took probably about 9 months longer than I thought it would. So it took a year and a half, almost a little bit longer than a year and a half to get everything completed. But what's really cool about that is that just from the construction, we got enough equity into it. And then you want to make sure that it still cash flows. So you're going to then take a look at the cash flow of what you get from that. You want to make sure you get all your money out, but maybe you don't want to take it to the max loan that you could get on the property, so you could get a little bit more cash flow or whatever that might be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think really, if you're doing the BRRRRs, I think you have to be really good at either finding contractors, finding deals, or a combination of the two, because you can really look at it those two different ways, where you just find really good deals and then you can just kind of use the valuation that you can get afterwards as the way to get your cash out, or you're actually doing a pretty robust construction project. And every market's a little bit different in that as well. That's kind of what our market looks like.
Awesome. So you spoke a little bit to the difference between like a small multifamily BRRRR deal versus a single family. Talk about like how you plan a BRRRR deal, and for someone looking to do it, when do you start getting contractors involved? Like when you go into it and you start to do some rough numbers on what it'll cost, right? You might be off by 5 or 10,000 either way, right? When do you start getting contractors involved? How do you plan a BRRRR deal?
Yeah, great question. As much as possible, I'm going to get a contractor involved after. I'm going to go look at it first, and I'm just going to say, does this even make sense? To bring a contractor through or whatever. A lot of times, I'll make sure I get my square footage measurements. I'm going to get as much stuff as possible. How many windows am I replacing? How many interior doors am I replacing? How many exterior doors am I replacing? As much of that as possible, and then I'm going to get my my square footage of what's the actual building like. And I try to break out as much as possible as I can. And so I've got my own pro formas where I actually, look at, okay, I've got this much square footage. I'm going to need this much flooring. And there's a lot of stuff that's kind of commoditized. So your price for flooring installed is generally going to be about the same, give or take maybe 50 cents a square foot. But if if you have a 2,000 square foot house, you could have 20 contractors through there, and of your best contractors that are giving you the best price, you're going to be relatively close. And similar with like hanging sheetrock, and so I think it's important to start knowing what some of those numbers are. I think Jay Scott has a book out, the book on rehab costs, I think, or rehabbing properties. And that's a really great reference to say, for my window, I should pay X amount. And then, verify with people in your market and things like that. But a lot of these items you can kind of come up with yourself. And then it depends how you run the project. So if you hire like a full-on general contractor, then you're probably going to want to get him out there, right away. For me, I know what my flooring guy is going to charge. I can call up my plumber and say, hey, I've got 3 bedroom or three bathrooms and a kitchen. Here's kind of the layout. What would be the rough price? And he's going to give me a price within $500. Same thing with my electrician. Hey, it's generally this size. What's my general price? Same thing with my HVAC, my air conditioning and heating. And then where I have a little bit of trouble is like on my numbers with like painting and even drywall. Sometimes I'll count the drywall and then I'll be significantly off. I'll say, oh, I only need 120 boards of drywall in here and I need 200, or whatever it might be. So for me, I get in the contractors that I'm not entirely certain of. And I want to get those, or framing. Framing can pretty drastically change based off of what I think. So I'm going to usually get my framer and my drywaller in there is what I'm trying to do. And those are usually the only numbers that I need to get to where I feel comfortable, actually putting an offer on a property. Personally, I do drawings on every property. I think it helps keep the contractors in line as well, where I can say, you didn't put a light here and it's clearly on the drawings that there should be a light here. Yeah. So I think that's a really great tool. So if you can find a guy to do floor plans for you for a relatively affordable price, our guy out here does them between $700 and $1,000 per building. But for me, it's $1,000 very well spent because I can just give it to contractors. I can get bid prices that way. Good contractors will be able to do a bid price based on that and maybe some pictures and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I set one up, and it depends on your level of expertise. But for me, I've gotten to a level where I feel comfortable in knowing how much the windows are going to be, or how much the flooring is going to be, or the doors and things like that. And then I'll just verify my plumbing, electrical, and HVAC, and then all the other stuff I might actually get a contractor through.
Right. And if you talk to contractors, a lot of times you'll say, "Hey, listen," and I do this with the contractors I deal with. I'm like, "Hey, I have no problem doing all the groundwork. Do you have a price list?" Right. And so with a couple of my contractors, they've given me price lists, right, for their flooring, install price, like you said, versus this or that. And so you go there and I draw out floor plans. There's a couple unique sites you can use for free. Magic Plan is pretty cool. You can use with your phone. You can do a whole drawing of the property, not quite as in depth as having something to actually draw it out for you, but it's a good first step. Right. So you kind of get the square footage. You can then say, hey, I have 1,000 square feet I need of, tile versus, whatever it is. And you can go get a basic price. And then when you get to a certain point in the deal where you're under contract or whatever, now all of a sudden you get the contractors out there. You find all the variables, right? You get it down to more of a concrete price. But there's a lot of legwork you can do. You learn so much. That's how I learned a lot about all of this, is just doing the legwork.